is that exposed to the body's lymphatic system? No, it is not, because if it is, what do you get? Remember that lymphocytic, plasmacytic thyroiditis, as you can see in dogs. Main cause of hypothyroidism in dogs and problem in humans also. And that barrier between the inside of the follicle and the lymphatics is broken. And so, since it's never been exposed to the outside, what's the body going to recognize it as being? Foreign. And what's it going to make against it? Antibodies. So it makes antibodies against the thyroid hormones, against the thyroid follicular cells. And are antibodies nice things to have in your tissue? What's going to happen to those tissues? They're going to be gone. Okay? This is just showing you a histology of the thyroid follicle. You can see the capillary in there. You can see the colloid in the middle, lined by the follicles right there. This is just another one. Shows you just, again, the glandular tissues arranged in follicles, which are the A's there. And they're filled with a homogeneous substance called colloid. And this makes the thyroid unique in that this is how you can store from 2 to 3 months of thyroid hormones in this colloid. And so it's basically a very good main storage form for thyroid hormones. It's also where some of the final steps of thyroid hormone synthesis occur. Your parafollicular cells, which are C up there. Anybody know what the parafollicular cells secrete? You can read the thing. It says calcitonin, right? Which is involved in what regulation? Calcium and phosphorus regulation. Okay? Now, they are considered to be two separate. In other words, the calcitonin cells are considered to be an endocrine organelle to themselves, and the thyroid to itself there. Okay? This is just showing you, again, a big cross-section of the thyroid. Does this look like a very active thyroid or not so active?
Active.
Well, let's look at the differences here. Well, we'll see that in a minute. We'll see that in a minute. Here's just showing you your parafollicular cells, is your colloid. Now here, that one was kind of like the one on the left here, wasn't it? And you notice the epithelium, is it very tall or is it kind of low? Low. It's low. Is the colloid got any vesicles in it or is it uniform? What does that tell you about that thyroid? Decreased function. That doesn't mean it can't work, it just means it's not being called upon. Whereas if you look at the one on the left, what about the epithelial lining there?
Thicker.
It's more cuboidal. And you notice some of the vacuoles as far as the colloid is concerned. That means that's being exocytosed so it can release the thyroid hormone. Okay? Now, as far as the colloid, it is a very thick fluid. It contains mainly iodinated thyroglobulin, which is about 660,000 Daltons, which is a relatively large molecule. And thyroglobulin is a glycoprotein scalpel composed of 134 tyrosines. Because what's thyroid hormone made out of? Tyrosine, just like catecholamines are. Okay. Now, as far as your synthesis of thyroid, is synthesized by thyroid epithelial cells, secreted into the lumen of the follicle through exocytosis, and this synthesis is all under the thyroid stimulating hormone control from the pituitary. Now, only a few of the tyrosines on each molecule of your thyroglobulin are actually used to synthesize T4 and T3, but you have all that rest scalpeling there, so if it needs more, it's available so it can make more of it. In an active storage form of the thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, that can be considered a prohormone. In other words, thyroglobulin, you make thyroid hormone from it, right? And what is it? What's the hormone called? What's the substance called? It's the base step for a hormone, a prohormone. So this is a prohormone stage. Now, inactive glands, as I said, have a large amount of colloid. Inactive glands, now you're not going to say a small amount, but we're saying in comparison to if they were inactive. Because all thyroids look like they have a pretty good load of colloid in them. But it's not going to be as much in your active because what's happening to it? It's being used to release your thyroid hormones. Okay? Now, again, the tight junctions between the thick follicular epithelial cells prevent the thyroglobulin from leaking out. But if that breaks down, what we got here? Y'all have seen this before. What do we got here? Is this a thyroid? It's a thyroid, but what's it got in it?
Terminal center.
Germinal center and all kinds of lymphocytes. So what do you think is going to be the ultimate fate of that thyroid? You know, grave is in 1 foot in, right? It's going to be gone, right? So what do you think you're going to have? How can you treat this? You're going to probably take it out and give them thyroid supplementation. One reason but usually we'll take it out if we can in that we can get rid of a lot of those antibodies that are being produced by it so it won't attack the thyroid hormone we're giving. Okay? Now, as far as the synthesis, again, the thyroid hormones are synthesized by mechanisms that are a little different from those that we talked about as far as the pituitary hormones and this type of thing. It is a multi-step process and involves both the thyroid follicular cells and the colloid. Remember, your other hormones basically is within the secretory cell itself where all the steps take place. But the thyroid is a little different. It involves those secretory cells as well as the colloid out there. And both the thyroid follicles then are both a factory for the manufacture of your thyroid hormones and as a warehouse for storage of them. Because again, is the thyroid hormone extremely important in regulating metabolism and everything else? So would you want to have to wait, you go out and you run, would you want to have to sit down for several hours and wait for the thyroid to be able to start producing more hormone? Well, that's probably what we'd like to do, but we're not supposed to. But anyway, so that thyroid then can just release more hormone and keep you going, right? That depends. I told you about exercise. Don't kill yourself with the exercise to do that, right? Okay. Now, basically, thyroid hormones are basically two tyrosines that are linked together, and they're bound covalently with iodine at either 3 or 4 positions. What do you think the one that's got 3 in it is called?
T3.
That's T3. Why don't we call it T3? 3 iodines, right? And if we have 4, tetra. Okay, tri or tetra. Okay, T4, T3. Now, the 2 principal thyroid hormones are those. There's thyroxine, which is T4, tetraiodothyronine. It's also called L-3, 5, 3 prime, 5 prime. Tetraiodose. It just tells you the positions on the aromatic ring that those are on.
Sure didn't know.
And the triiodose is the other one, that's T3. And this is just showing you the structures of them down here. And where they are is important. If you look down there at T3, see the one in the middle, that's T3? See where those iodines are? What about the one on the far right for you all? Are those iodines in the same position? There's still 3 of them in there. But that's called reverse T3. That's inactive T3. Now that can have a storage form where it can be changed and those structure be restructured so that the T3s are in the right place. I mean, iodine's in the right place and you get active T3. But this is a reserve inactive form. Okay? So let's look at the synthesis of thyroid hormone. This diagram basically summarizes all of it, but we're going to go through this. Thyroid hormone synthesis and release begins with iodine transport. Because remember, this is the only hormone that has halogen in it, and that's iodine. Now, where does it get the iodine from? Diet. And it goes into the blood, and then the gland kicks it out from the blood, right? And it's going to have to go against a concentration gradient. So that reason it has to have an active pump to pump it in. So there's a sodium iodide transporter that pumps iodine into the thyroid follicular cell. And then we'll oxidize it. It's going to go from iodide to iodine, okay? Now, there's a process called organification, and this is where the iodine combines with tyrosine to form mono or diiodotyrosine. Then we have coupling, and this is where those 2 diiodose will go together and form what? T4. What if it's a mono and a diiodose go together? That's T3, and so that's called coupling. Then they're stored. They migrate to the colloid space in the center of the thyroid follicle. They bind onto the thyroid globulin and they stay there. Then we have secretion, and this is where you reverse that process. You have endocytosis, cleavage, release of the hormones, and recycling of what's the other things that got exocytosed into the cell. Okay. So again, step 1 is iodide transport, and that's the first step, is to basically the uptake and concentration of iodine by the thyroid follicular cell. And again, it has to, since it's against the concentration gradient, it has to have an active pump. And that is the sodium iodide transporter. What hormone do you think activates that? How about FSH? How about TSH? ACTH? Which one is going to do it?
TSH.
No, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. FSH is follicular stimulating hormone. Okay, so TSH, and where's TSH come from? Thyroid to the pituitary, right? Okay, this is going to requires energy to do all this. And the normal thyroid serum iodine ratio is 30 to 40 to 1. This is the rate limiting step in basically thyroid hormone. See, if it's 30 times more concentrated in the cell than it is in the serum, but it's going to diffuse in, or you're going to have to pump it in. You're going to have to pump it in. Now, after you trap that iodine within the cell, it's going to be transported to the basolateral or the colloid facing membrane of the follicular cell. And basically, this is just telling you what the iodine metabolism is, summarizes it. So it's absorbed from the small intestine. It's mainly cleared by the kidneys, about 77%. 20% is absorbed by the thyroid, and the rest is never absorbed, period, is lost in the feces. Now, as far as, if I have adequate thyroid, iodine stores and stuff, will I decrease my absorption of iodine usually? In the gut? Usually you will if your blood levels are high enough, but sometimes you get problems with that mechanism. And that's where we have these toxic plants and things that can cause problems as far as thyroid is concerned. But what it's trying to do is to prevent iodine excess or deficiency as far as its regulatory mechanisms, but you can overload that mechanism, and that's where we have some of the problems. Now, organification. That means that we're putting the iodine on the tyrosine, on the thyroglobulin, okay? And this happens in the follicular cell. The iodine, as we say, is oxidized back to iodine. And that's an enzyme called thyroid peroxidase, or TP. And it's a very important enzyme. It's basically it is dependent upon selenium, vitamin E, and zinc. And so deficiencies can interfere with that. Okay? It's going to be transported to the cell-colloid interface, and it's coupled by the action of this TP also to the tyrosine residues on the thyroglobulin. You can see this diagram down here showing you what it's doing. That is inside the follicle now, and that's the colloid inside the follicle, okay? And you can see that it's iodizing those tyrosines, okay? And thyroid peroxidase does that. So now we've got a diode of tyrosine. Both of those are diode of tyrosines, aren't they? Now, if you only do it on, one of them, it's monoiodose, but you don't have a picture of that, okay? All right, now, coupling is where you're going to take the iodotyrosine results, and it's going to give you the formation of T3 and T4. In other words, you take two diiodos, what are you going to get? T4. If you take a one monoiodone and one diiodone, you're going to get T3. And so basically, that's going to be coupled together. By far the most abundant one is T4. Okay? Now you notice that enzyme is important in various steps. So that enzyme deficiency, what do you think is going to do to thyroid function? You're not going to get very good thyroid function from it. These are just I know this is biochemistry, I apologize, or organic chemistry, whatever you want to look at. How many of you like that? Y'all told me before, how many of you like organic chemistry? Well, it seems to me there was more than two before. Y'all changed your mind already? What about biochemistry? Organic chemistry is the basis for biochemistry, right? I mean, when I had organic chemistry at West Virginia University, I used to spend hours doing those problems. I loved those problems. I love to do those problems in organic chemistry. I enjoyed chemistry. In organic chemistry, my instructor got fired because he failed too many people. I got an A from him, so I liked him. But anyway. But these are the equations to show you how you get T4 and T3. And what's alanine? Amino acid. Is it a pretty important amino acid? Right, so this also acts as a source of that so that it can be used for other things. Okay. Now we have storage. Once those T3 and T4 are synthesized, they remain bound to your thyroglobulin, so they're stored inside the follicle. Okay. Now, this gives you basically a good amount of storage for this. Now, if you have iodine sufficiency, then about 70% of those iodinated compounds are going to be MIT and DIT. 30% are going to be T3, T4, and T3, and T4 by far the most in it, okay? So in other words, if you've got enough iodine, the body doesn't have to worry about having a bunch of the activated hormone there already. So it makes a bunch more storage of the precursor that goes into making the T4 and T3, okay? Now, in contrast again to most endocrine glands, the thyroid colloid has a good 2 to 3 months supply of thyroid hormone. And so it can, withstand some problems as far as, illnesses and things like that a lot better than some of your other glands can. Now release. And TSH controls all steps in the secretion and release of T3, T4. So you can see it acts on iodine uptake, it acts upon colloid production, it acts upon iodination, it acts upon the stored release. So TSH has multiple sites of function as far as thyroid hormone is concerned. Now thyroid globulin has to be hydrolyzed. What's it mean by hydrolyzed? You got to break the bonds down there, right, between the colloid and the T3 and T4, right? So it breaks those down, and this basically again is TSH stimulation. You get endocytosis of the thyroid globulin from the lumen into the follicular cell. It fuses with your lysosomes in there, and the lysosomes cleave off T3 and T4 from the thyroid globulin. They also will cleave off mono and diiodotyrosine. Now, the T4 and T3 are going to be released into the blood, and they pass freely through the basal cell membrane. Most of the secreted hormone, greater than 90%, is going to be T4. Now, what's the active form, T3 or T4? T3 is the active form. So would you want to release all this huge active hormone at once? You'd be bouncing off the walls, right? And so it releases the T3 to meet the immediate concerns, and then the T4 will be taken up by the cells and changed into T3 as is needed. And so that's how it regulates that. Now, the MIT and the DIT are going to be deionated within the cells. This is an enzyme called iodotyrosine dehalogenase, and then it's going to recycle those things. It's going to recycle the iodine, it's going to recycle the tyrosines and everything so that they can continue to make more hormone. So the thyroid is very conservative. It does not like to waste any of its resources. And the releases just summarizes the release. The diagram shows you how it's doing that. And again, lysosomes are very important in that. And once problems as far as lymphocytic thyroiditis, it can interfere and destroy the lysosomes in the cells also, so that aggravates some of the situation we have with that disease process. Okay? So those are the steps. And this is a diagram that summarizes those steps. And notice the numbers, 1, 2, 3. That also makes a very good diagram to put on the exam. Ask you what stage, what stage 5? That's coupling. What about stage 4? It's organification. Now I will tell you, if you have this on exam, you're not going to have the legend down there. Okay? So one year I forgot you didn't take the legend off, and I still had students missing it. I guess they thought it was too good. I was trying to trick them. It was too good to be true there. But anyway, okay? I don't think it'll work now because y'all are on to me now. Well, I could change the numbers.
That'll work. Like a matching.
Yeah, well, it does make a recent matching. Okay, now, the majority, as we say, of the thyroid hormone secreted is T4, but T3 is the active hormone. And although some T3 is also secreted, again, the bulk of T3 is made at the target tissue site from the T4. Okay, it takes up the T4, cleaves off an iodine, makes the T3. All right? They're poorly soluble in water, and now they're a peptide hormone. Does that go along with that? Remember we said that the thyroid hormones are more like steroid hormones as far as they're insoluble in water, so they have to have carrier proteins usually. And also, where's the receptor for thyroid hormone? Inside the cell. Where's the receptor for most peptide hormone? Cell membrane. So this is different, okay? Basically, the carrier proteins, there's different ones, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but anyway. And what they do, if you have a carrier protein, that allows it to be stable pool available in the blood. Also, it can inhibit the protease activity upon it. Plus, these thyroid hormones are very small. If they didn't have a carrier protein with them, what would the kidney do with them? Secrete them. And you just go out through the GI tract and everything else. And so that helps them to last that long. And again, there's a small amount of unbound T4. It's called free T4. usually approximately a little less than 1% of the total T4 in there. And the free T4 can be readily taken up into cells and converted into T3, but it's also not as affected by what we call euthyroidal illnesses. What are euthyroidal illnesses?
It's not the thyroid.
Yeah, it's not the thyroid, it's the problem, it's something affecting the thyroid, another disease process affecting the thyroid. And stress is one of the worst ones. What happens to your energy levels when you get really stressed? You have a lot of them or you just want to sleep. And one of the problems with that is these